What's good, y'all? Blacksmith here, and today we're here to talk about In a Violent Nature. Not gonna lie, I saw this movie the Thursday night that it came out, and I didn't rush to make a review about it because I had to let this movie sit with me for a few days just to think about what I was gonna say because this movie is so different. The whole plot point of this movie is that the entire movie's perspective is taken from that of the villain, meaning that every single event that we see throughout this film comes solely from the perspective of the villain. So it's safe to say that this is not your average horror movie, but is it worth a watch? Let's talk about it. Now normally, the plot for a movie like this would be centered around a group of teens who get stalked and terrorized by a resurrected corpse containing a vengeful spirit. But this time, reverse it. This movie is about a resurrected corpse containing a vengeful spirit who terrorizes a group of teens. Now, I know you might be wondering, why is he terrorizing this group of teens? Well, I don't want to give that away, but it's pretty simple. It's a very simplistic plot that you would find in a lot of horror movies that take place in the woods. And quite frankly, does it really matter why he's doing it? I mean, it's pretty simple. It's a basic horror movie plot. It doesn't even really matter at this point. All right, let's get into these pros and cons. I want to start the first pro off talking about the concept of this film and its execution. I don't know about y'all, but I personally love the idea of having a movie, a horror movie at that, shot from the perspective of the killer. And with the whole killer in the woods theme that they chose to go with instead of the outrageous other type of horror movie themes that are out there, they were able to pull this one off fantastically. The killer here is not some sort of demonic entity, not a ghost. He's some Jason-esque type of character. And with movies like Friday the 13th, where we obviously know Jason is the main character, this movie takes it a step further and not only establishes the killer as the main character, but shows everything happening from his eyes. At a few certain points, some of the shots in this movie made it look as if you were playing a video game and you were controlling the character and their movements. And other times, it just made it look like a video game cutscene. I loved the way this movie was shot. And another thing that made this movie extremely interesting with the way it was executed was the fact that because this movie was shot from the killer's perspective, there was no music involved. Yeah, you know those moments in horror movies when you would see the victims clash with the killer and you would hear music in the background as they're running or fighting? Yeah, this movie had none of that. This movie completely flipped every horror trope when it came to the victims on its head and pretty much got rid of everything about character development that most people or some people would like to see when watching a horror movie. With the absence of music, this movie almost made it seem as if you were watching a National Geographic special about horrific killers out in the wild. So it made the main character almost look animalistic. Yeah, all this movie was missing was some commentary that sounded like something straight out of National Geographic or Animal Planet. The next pro I want to talk about, the kills. While there was nothing particularly special about the kills, because they were coming from the killer's perspective, you got to see a whole lot more detail. Every single sound that came from each stab, each cut, each twist of a knife, you got to hear it up close. And you got to see everything up close too, so this movie got its title for a reason. Be prepared for that. And speaking of seeing and hearing everything up close, this movie really did something funny too that I just have to point out. You know, like in a horror movie when you would hear the victims hiding from the villain and you can hear them talking about a plan and the villain's in the room and looking around and whatnot trying to figure out where they are? Yeah, this movie shows that the killer can hear all that. So anytime you see a horror movie from now on where the victims are hiding from the villain in the same room and they're whispering, you keep in mind that most likely the killer can hear them. Now, let's get to the cons. To be completely real, there weren't a lot of cons I could find to this movie because everything was so minimalistic and only taking place from one person's perspective. But I will say, I did not like the acting of any of the other characters in the movie. Each line sounded very drawn out and corny and just very unnecessary at times. But I could be bugging because that may have been done purposefully because this movie is not about the victims, it's about the killer. So really, we might be hearing everything as the villain would hear it because it's coming from their perspective and not the victims. So everything the victims were saying might just sound that corny to the villain. And if that was done intentionally, then bravo. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I think more movies like this need to be made in the horror genre. So if you're a fan of horror movies, I would say go see this, but disclaimer, this is all coming from this killer's perspective, as I said numerous times in this review. There's not a lot of character development when it comes to the victim, so if you're a fan of horror movies from the victim's perspective, this probably might not be for you. This movie has absolutely no fluff or character development, it's strictly the violence. Thanks for checking out my review. Let me know if you plan on seeing this movie. Let me know if you've already seen it and what you thought about it. Let me know what you thought about this review, and give your boy a like and a follow. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, peace.